All right. So hello, everybody, and welcome. This is the 15th episode of Fiberside Chats. And so believe it or not, this is going to be the last episode of what I'm going to refer to as season 1. We're going to take a break for the summer, and we will come back on November 14th to resume talking to all of the amazing fiber artists, dyers, shepherds, all of the wonderful people that are part of the wool and fiber arts community. So today, on this very special day, I'm going to be speaking with Kayla. So if you want to come on camera and mic to join me, but Kayla is coming from Four Hearts Mainely Fiber. And so I'm really excited to be able to talk to her today about all the fibery things. So if today is your first time joining us for the live session, all you have to do is go ahead and put any questions or comments you have for either Kayla or myself in the comment section, and then I will read them at the end. So without further ado, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having us, and thanks for doing this. It's such a fun way to get to know everyone here.
Definitely. And I know one of the highlights or the appeals or attractions of the wool and fiber arts, of course, is when there's the live sale weekend. And I know that you were one of the vendors that was vending and selling your wares this weekend. So and it's not just about necessarily people, going and buying and shopping and all of that, right? The group has like so much more to it. But I'm just curious because, as a participant in the sales, like watching the vendors do the sales, right? It can be something that maybe as a viewer, people don't necessarily understand like what goes into actually putting all of that together, right? So it's not just like turning the camera on and being like, hi people, check out the stuff that I have. Okay, cool. And then, sending stuff out the door. But I mean, it's like months and months of preparation. It's, being in a space where you're like, we were just talking about being so frustrated with the technology because everything that can go wrong does go wrong. Like maybe right now I'm even muted, who knows? But yeah, it's just like all of these things that can happen. So can you just tell us a little bit more about yourself and what, I'm curious, was the experience of vending this weekend like for you?
Absolutely. So this weekend, we've been with WAFA now for just about a year and a half. I think we started in November of 2020. I love it because it's a community. It's not a group. It's not just a thing that happens, like some festivals you go to and that's it till you see everyone next year. This has embraced such a unity amongst everyone of all genres of fiber arts. And it's so fun to watch because what I know and what I practice and how I dye and how I knit and how I weave and everything else is totally different than some other people. And it's so fascinating that the same result can come out of two very different techniques. So for me and show weekend, it definitely was crazy this month. We had a lot of changes here on the farm and adapting to some new situations. But this weekend we also had a litter of puppies on top of everything that made it super fun. But
what kind of puppies? What kind of puppies?
We have labs. We breed English labs. So we have 6 puppies that came late Wednesday night. So it was a couple sleepless nights. So luckily I try about a month ahead of time to try to make my product for the next couple months. So I'm always trying to stay ahead, like best laid plans. I always end up scrambling at the end for a couple more things. But luckily I was able to get enough done this winter to kind of piece some things together to have in advance, knowing that I was going to be running all over the place. So I am kind of a single person as far as the creativity side goes. We have our farm with my husband and my 2 kids. They do a lot. I know we've discussed about I have some physical challenges and some ailments that have affected the way we do business, and we downsized this year to focus more on the creativity side, make it manageable to adapt. So many things in this world we have to adapt to and change what our views were originally because it's necessity.
Yeah, and I think that's, that's something that, when we're creating and we're making and we're doing things, not necessarily from the business perspective, but just like as creatives in general, it really requires all of your basic needs to be met in order for your brain to be in that space where you can like think creatively and like, like produce things in a way where you're not under stress or duress, right? So like as a trained teacher, it's called like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So like you have to feel safe, you have to make sure that like your food needs are met and that sort of thing. But there is a type of stressor that like when you are experiencing chronic illness, that it doesn't go away. It's not like a headache where, you take some medicine and then, okay, today is going to be my off day. And then tomorrow, I know I'll be good. And we kind of take our health for granted. So, the idea of still trying to find that balance, or at least hold that creative space in high regard and guarding it, right? Like instead of just giving up and saying, what, this is whatever my lot is, and I'm not going to even bother doing creative stuff because I don't even have, I know in the people with chronic illness sometimes will refer to it have enough spoons, right? That you only have so much energy to accomplish tasks throughout the day. And so sometimes giving up on doing something creative for yourself that's actually mentally fulfilling and like emotionally fulfilling can be almost overwhelming, because physically you can't find that balance, right? And so I'm curious, like, what are some of the things that you felt have really helped you kind of make that a priority? Obviously, maybe having it as a business is one motivating factor, but is there anything else that you found has really helped you kind of get over that maybe that I don't want to say when you have like something that's physically like hurting you or making it hard for you to get over it, it almost becomes like a mental block, right? So like how do you kind of talk yourself out of your own head in a way to still make space for that creativity?
Absolutely. So I guess a little background on my issues. Yeah, I'm an open book. I share about it very openly because there's so many people out there that don't know that there's people out there dealing with what they're dealing with. So about 4 years ago, I had some issues with, well, about 6 years ago, I developed some issues with my legs and my feet, loss of sensation, lots of pain. Multiple doctors couldn't figure out what was going on. A couple years later, I went to get out of bed, took a couple steps, and my foot broke in a couple places. Wow. And the bones essentially fell apart. At the time, I was a paramedic and very involved in a city department, working in hospital-based EMS and going for critical care and a lot of other things, that was kind of like the path in life. And I think throughout my life, there's always been like, I have to do this so I can go on to the next thing. And there was always like a clear journey that I was trying to take. Sometimes I'd get off course, but I'd always, find ways to get it back on track, because physically, mentally, you have these interruptions in time where whether it's, moving or divorce or other things, they do totally disrupt your lifestyle in the moment. And then you have to work towards regrouping and rebuilding and kind of pulling things back together after this like layout of everything everywhere. Mm-hmm. So for me, before all this, I was in the gym 5 days a week. I had a horse, so I was very active in riding and doing trails and learning and all kinds of stuff. As far as physical activity goes, I was a hiker. So there was a lot of things initially that, it was like, all right, a couple surgeries and then I'll start feeling better. So there was always like, okay, after this, I'll get back to normal. After this, I'll get back to normal. Unfortunately, that's just not the way things worked out. I had 8 surgeries total, with some more outcomes as far as the bones. And this year, at the beginning of the year, I was told that it's just something that I have to accept. There's not much they can do about it, except for treating the pain and the emotional side that goes along with it. So it was a huge hit to be like, okay, like life is not what I'm thinking it's going to be next. Like, all along it's always been, I'll get through this and I'll move on. So now it's like, where do you move on to when you're told that everything is different? So in the beginning of this year, ultimately, I was told that, I've had issues with my mobility going downhill over the past couple of years. So eventually it will require me using a wheelchair and other things. So a lot of decisions were made based on emotional well-being, because the physical side is not changeable at this time. And that was a very hard thing. Like, people have to grieve the life they had before to open up, to allow something like this in to be the new goal, to be the new focus, to be the reason why you get up in the morning.
Yeah,
and I think
definitely. Yeah.
Totally, anyone with chronic illness or, diseases that disrupt your ability to just get up in the morning and go for a walk, or get up and go hang out with your kids, go to the beach. You really do a lot of soul searching, and internalizing everything and evaluating your entire life to realize, all right, what do I need to do just to be happy? Like, where do I find my joy again? For me, it was always riding my horse or getting out there and doing stuff in nature. That was always that stress reliever, that no matter what, I could do any of those things and the world was right again. So as far as fiber arts, I learned how to crochet back when I was 6, with a couple other kids in the neighborhood. Some of the parents taught us, and then it was knitting and weaving in the little pot looms when I was younger. And crochet has always been the thing I go back to. Kind of when I had my first surgery, it was like I was crocheting all the time. And then I picked up more of the spinning and getting into the side a lot more. Clearly, I just dove right down that rabbit hole. And it was a discovery of finding my creative side again. I think as adults, we all have to adult sometimes, and you lose your childlike creativity, where you just let things happen. I very much, as a paramedic, was a type A personality. Things had to be very much in order. I am not like that now. I have given up on thinking that there is a process in this world that we can all understand and everything happens, because we're all just winging it. We're in a world where so many things happen personally, in the world and society, that there's so many things outside of our control, that being able to let go and accept life just is, and do with it what you can. That was a hard lesson to learn, but it's gotten to a point now where I have this release where I can go into my studio and I can dye things up. And I'm very much mad scientist about it. I'm kind of the naughty one. Like, I can't do formulas and I can't write everything down and I can't write my recipes down. I just need to feel and let the fiber create what it wants to with what I'm throwing into it. Which was very freeing in itself. Like, it's amazing when you go from, a baker, that everything is so exact. And while dyeing and fiber arts are exact, there is a lot of personal touches and adaptability that you can add to it to make it your own, and create something unique.
Yeah, no, I was definitely gonna say, yeah, I always use food analogies when it comes to the fiber arts, because, like you said, with baking, right? Like, you can see some recipes and they'll say, like, you have to scoop the flour and do like take it with a teaspoon and plop it in so that it can aerate, and all of these technical things. And then you have people that just throw stuff together, it'll be fine. And I think both ways, because you said that you're kind of naughty, or like that it wasn't the right way of doing it. But I think that for someone that is a creative, right? If you find something that works for you, then it's the right way, right? So it's like, there's no right or wrong. Now, you may have seen people doing something, and also to speak to what you said too, as we become adults, that I think what happens is we often lose our sense of like play and curiosity, and we want to avoid the pain maybe that comes from making a mistake, or from failing, or for not doing something the right way, as opposed to seeing or embracing the idea of playing and exploring more as a process that has to occur in order to get better, right? Like, I always like to use the analogy, you have to burn toast to know how hot to cook bread, how long to cook it. Maybe you even find out you like burnt toast. So, there's no like right or wrong way to necessarily go about making toast. There's thousands of different ways to do it. And, you can pretty much do that for yourself as a fiber artist too. But the other thing that you said that, I think is really interesting too, with regard to grieving our previous lives and taking the time to actually allow ourselves to be in this space where we don't try to go on so quickly to the next phase, right? So I think maybe if we're able-bodied, it might seem a little bit easier mentally to do that. But I think that when, like yourself with the chronic illness, I know like my mother, she had multiple sclerosis. It really makes you consider and question, what do you want to get out of life? That I think that if you're healthier, you don't necessarily always have that as your daily reminder, right? Like you have that broad kind of scheme, but like when you have chronic illness, then I think it makes every minute of every day is a very conscientious one. Like, how am I going to get the most out of this minute right now? And so,
Absolutely.
yeah, when you allow yourself to, grieve and slow down a little bit, then I think you're right. Then it also allows you to also experience joy too. But if we try to kind of push through and be like, no, like the soldier mentality, right? Like, no, we gotta get through this. And, then I think it makes it harder because you never actually had that chance to heal from that news or that experience. And then it also makes it harder for you to create. And then just one last thing, and then I'm gonna hear from you too, because what's interesting, I was reading this like description of what stress is to people and creativity, right? And so in the human sense, going back in time to our biological evolution, the idea that stressor, like if a lion is chasing you, your body has three responses. You can either fight, there's the flight part, but I didn't know that there was this component too of freezing, right? So like if the lion is coming at you, okay, first you run, then you start punching it in the face if it catches you. But then if you go limp and act dead, maybe the lion might try to eat you, so it bears anyway. But if you go like stiff, right, then basically the lion should potentially stop attacking you. And so in our current state, especially with like the bombardment every day on the news of like all of these things that it just seems, like Rome is burning to the ground, that it can really make us feel frozen, and like watching the news can make us feel frozen. And, hearing stories about our loved ones and everything going on with COVID can make us feel frozen. So I think that this act of freezing becomes even harder to visualize or to see that being creative is a way to unfreeze ourselves, right? And to kind of thaw ourselves out and put us back in touch with the things that fill us up and that rejuvenate us. So I'm curious then, in your story, when you had that shift, right, what happened that allowed you to really see this now as a viable way of moving forward, compared to your previous life?
Absolutely. So I totally agree with that soldier mentality. Any void you're trying to fill with something, because that's what we're programmed to do. You go to grade school, then you go to middle school, and you go to high school, and and then you work, and then you're working project-based in typical society. If you look at the societal norms, which I think are getting a little more looser, because there's a lot of us creatives kind of getting in there and shaking things up lately. So for me, about 2 years into this process and trying to understand, a lot of it came in learning when to stop, question why. What happened to me, there's no reason. The doctors have no input as to why it happened or why it happened to me. There is no real research on this condition that gives clear answers as far as how it happened, what to do when it happens, and how to deal with it after the fact. Unfortunately, a lot of people with this condition don't get better. It's a lot of, we'll fix your symptoms, but it's just, it's a change, very similar to any sort of condition that affects your mobility. So about 2 years in, I was around probably surgery number 5 and 6. I developed a lot of anxiety, depression, because things weren't getting better. And I'm like, you just get on with things. So it's not getting better and I don't know what to do. And I tried everything. I'd seen every specialist in Boston, which is some of the top doctors in the country. So it was a lot of, again, that looking into yourself and realizing nobody has all the answers. Nobody's meant to have all the answers. Some things just happen. It is, take it as you're learning a lesson, or it's bringing you to something. You may not like it, but eventually it gets you where you're supposed to be in this world, whether you realized it or not. So about 2 years in, I was dealing with that, and I started, getting therapy and trying to work through emotions and understanding deeper rooted things that had set in there because of all this. Through a few really, really, really good therapists and a great psychiatrist, they openly talked to me and discovered that this mentality of push, 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 got to keep going, always have to find the next thing, was a very good indicator that I had ADHD, which I had suspected, but women in my age group back then, ADHD was not a thing. It wasn't an acceptable thing. It was just kids being naughty or kids not paying attention, stuff of that sort. So once I started getting treatment for that, it really did kind of slow the world down, because everything I was looking like, what can I do next? What specialists can I find across the country, in another country? Or what can I do next to make sure I have done everything possible? And while for certain circumstances, yes, you want to do that. You want to make sure no stone goes unturned, but there comes a point for me, 4 years later, was I have done everything. I need to be happy with where I'm at. And I need to stop this continual searching. So that diagnosis and getting treatment for that really helped kind of slow everything down, allowed me to work through things more individually instead of, I got this going on and this going on, this going on. And, my brain was still so scattered. So despite working on myself, I was working on too many things about myself at one time. So after getting treatment for that, that was about the time that I joined WAF. I was like, I can do this. I can push the fiber arts, because at the time we had a licensed dairy up until this spring, and I was still going out there and milking twice a day. But it got to a point where it was stress, it was tied down, and the joy of that had disappeared. Like, it was just another thing I have to force myself to do that drains so much of my energy, and my energy is so special to me, that certain people get my energy, certain projects get my energy, and being okay with learning your limits and focusing on what you can do and not what you can't do was super important. So we made that decision to sell off the dairy herd this spring, which it was very emotional. It was hard. I loved the animals probably more than I did making the cheese and going to markets. I'm very much a bleeding heart for animals, hence why we have puppies right now. So as hard as it was, and a lot of healing is still going on from that, there is a weight lifted that I realized just how much stress it had put on me. And there was probably over the winter, I had gotten a super creative block. I couldn't think of anything anymore. I didn't want to do new things, which for someone that has a creativity dependent business, that shuts you down real quick. So it was hard to find that, like, all right, I gotta get interested again. So when we made that change, it did take the weight off to allow myself to focus on smaller things in smaller portions. And what I love about the fiber arts is it a lot of work to get what I have in the shop created so far? Absolutely. But once you get to a point, for me, it's about 1.5 years, 2 years in, where I have inventory that I can rotate. I'm to a point now where if I spend 2 days a week or 1 day a week in the dye kitchen, I don't feel guilty. I don't feel guilty that I'm not down there 5 days a week creating every single day, because I'm creating what I can. And so it eliminated a lot of the pressure, because like any small business, you do want to accommodate everybody's wants and needs and what they're looking for. But when you start doing that, you lose the quality of what you're doing, because you can't please everyone, nor should you. You should pick what makes you happy and stick with it. And people either love it or they don't, which is a hard lesson to learn as a business owner, because we want to please people. We want to create relationships and, of course, generate sales. That's how we pay our bills at the end of the day. But if at the end of the day you're doing things to please everyone else and not yourself, you again suck the happiness right out of it for you, and it becomes a typical job. You know, we're small business owners because we either didn't like the corporate America where you're working for someone and not being able to voice your concerns or change things to make it better, to you're in control of making this the best thing you can make it. So as a small business owner, you really have to learn your own personal boundaries as to what you're willing to do for other people. And that totally goes hand in hand with my issue, where I have so much energy to give on a given day. I want to spend it on things that make me happy, that I enjoy making, that are fun and creative. And while I do love certain custom things, I love custom dyeing, because you do have those periods where you got a little block and you can't think of new colorways or combinations. And for someone to be like, well, I want this for my wedding and here's my colors. I love that sort of thing, because they usually say, here's 4 colors. I want to make a shawl, or I want to weave, or I want to knit. Can you make something that kind of takes these all? That's the type of creativity I like. But someone, you know, here's a deadline, by June 1st, you have to do these 3 things in this order. That was totally not my style.
Yeah, well, I mean, just so much of what you said resonates with me as well, on so many levels, you know. So with regard to having a life experience that slows you down and really kind of makes you reconsider, you know, is this the path that you really want to be on? You know, I know for myself personally, like I had a miscarriage, right? And so that was pretty devastating, because it was a late term miscarriage. And I, like you, was seeking, you know, why did this happen? Never got those answers. And so again, like you, just kind of feeling stuck. And so we tried again, and luckily I was able to have my son now. But if it wasn't for having my miscarriage, I don't think I would have appreciated being a mom. And so I think it's also like when you go through a really difficult breakup, you might think that it's like the worst thing ever that's happening in your life. But then when you meet somebody that is really, you know, more in tune with like you as a compatibility and stuff like that, then all of a sudden, I think you have a deeper appreciation for it. And you wouldn't have been able to join or go into this new relationship if you were still in the old one, right? So it's like sometimes things happen that, of course, you know, you wish you could go back and change it. But I also think that where you wind up, like you said, it's not necessarily fate, but it's more your attitude, you know. And I think what you're also saying about creating too is super important, because again, not even from the business standpoint, but the idea of what you're pouring into your products and your creations, that's going to be very evident in the products you create, right? So if you're creating under stress and duress and, you know, this like franticness, then that energy, like just my personal, you know, take on this, definitely gets infused into the products that way. But when you put, you know, love and care and, you know, attention to detail and all of that, you know, maybe you don't make 30 wedding cakes in 5 minutes, you know, maybe you just, you know, get like a cupcake and that's all you're going to get, right? But that cupcake is going to be so much more fulfilling to you as the artist for having created it. And then also the receiver, I think, is going to enjoy it because of the specialness of the care and attention that went into it, as opposed to trying to kind of rush through it. And I think that's also one of the things that I really love about, you know, this group and the vendors, is that it's not, for the most part, people taking things that, other people make and then selling them. Like, there is that about it, but a lot of it is people that are actually creating things as artists and actually making things, like from drop spindles to, the fiber and like actually raising the animals, all the way up, right? So I think that each part of the process is really infused with love. And so that makes it so much, I don't know, more of an enjoyable product to use, because now I get to see where it's coming from, who's creating it. And it just creates an experience, I don't know, for me anyway, that I enjoy it so much more on a deeper level, because I feel it's like a connection to another person as opposed to just consuming to consume,
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's just kind of my take on that. So I know you're talking about dyeing. So what, and you kind of just like to have fun with it. Are you more of like a natural dyer or an acid dyer? Do you do all of it? What's your take on dyeing?
So I do a lot of acid dyeing. I am more experimenting with the natural dyes. I haven't done a lot because it's a totally different thing than acid dyeing, and it's definitely more the baker mentality. Like, you do have to get certain things exact with that. So with some of my issues, my ability to focus on things is next to none at times. From the surgeries, I developed a bit of short-term memory loss. So what I used to be able to pick up and learn in a couple days, it takes a lot more effort for me to learn new skills now. And I'm very much, I have to learn everything about it. I can't just be like, steps 3, right? That'll get me there. No, I need to know why.
I'm team hyperfixation follower to the end of the rabbit hole too. So I'm there, right there with you.
For sure. So it's the natural dyeing is definitely a thing that I'm working on. I do like experimenting with people that come to my shop through WAFA and our small shop that we have here on our farm the past couple of years. I think it has been so amazing, like you said, to watch the one little thing I did turn into 2 or 3 different things down the road. My little bit of fiber somebody takes and turns into a beautiful yarn, and then they'll turn into something completely amazing. And I'm like, I never expected this to turn into that, but it's a fun way to watch how it changes through so many different people's perception and through their hands. And the whole primitive nature of fiber arts is just, it's refreshing. It's in a very technology dependent age, to revert back to simple primitive methods of doing things is just, it's wonderful to see it coming back to life. But yeah, so dyeing, it's mostly acid dyes, and I dye a little bit of everything. I'm a lover of all things locks and curly and funky. Like, I have all my fun colors over here. But again, I go into the dye kitchen with 0 plans. I found that's what works best for me, and whatever fiber I'm called to that day is what I work with. If you saw my cabinet of all my colors, you'd be like, how do you ever find anything? But it's more like, I'll just grab something and then I'll base something around that one color, and it comes together. So letting go of this like expectation that everything has to be beautiful and perfect. And it's so fun to watch the creators out there that use combinations that I would have never used in a million years and are so unique and unpredictable, but they create such amazing things with them. I know Marge on here that does those shawls with the locks and the color. Like, I still can't wrap my head around it sometimes, how she comes up with all these ideas, but it's so amazing to watch that level of creativity.
Yeah, and I think like what you're saying too earlier about like the difference between being process oriented or product oriented, that's something that I've, especially like to like having been an art teacher, like always considered, right? Like if I'm going to teach someone, quote unquote art, right? Like what is my job or my role in their creation of art, right? So it's like you can teach the skill, but you can't teach somebody necessarily, and I don't want to say like you can't teach them, but like imagination and creativity has to come from them. You know, it's not like you're going to copy me and then that's your imagination and creativity, right? So that's not art. That's just copying the skill. And so I feel like for myself personally that I've spent so much time perfecting the skill. And I think that's when you tend to be more on the product oriented side of things, right? Like you want to have high level of craftsmanship. You want to make sure that what you're making, you know, is like sound and structured and all of that. But I think when you live only on that track of being product oriented, it tends to not necessarily be less creative, you know, because obviously having limitations can sometimes push one's creativity. So there's that to it as well.
Right.
But I think the idea of allowing yourself to just be in the moment and whatever feels right to do next, that's what you do. That was something that has eluded me for like years. And so my husband is a musician. And so, you know, with regard to jazz and things like that, you know, that's definitely something that can happen. And also being a later in life diagnosed ADHDer, the idea of listening to jazz just drives me crazy because it didn't seem like there was any structural order to it. And like, I can't, like, you know, so like the sensory input of fiber is very mentally soothing, but listening to jazz is really hard. And like listening to, you know, classical music is really hard because it just seems like it's all over the place. And it's like, no, I need things in an order like way, right? But it was also really hard then to then break out and just trust that I could create something without having a picture to copy, without having a pattern to you know, knit and stuff like that. And so after taking medicine myself too, I really tried to say, okay, you know what, I've got the skill part, cool. I really want to do things that kind of forced me to not have this end product in mind and really just focus on the process. And so that's kind of like what got me into Saori weaving and just kind of freeform weaving and even just, you know, dying for the fun of it, kind of giving up on following these really strict formulas that I've created and stuff. And so when I did that, I found I was like so much happier making those things in the moment, that they were that instantaneous gratification as opposed to the product focused creative that could only be happy when the product was done, when the product was perfect, when it was exactly how I envisioned it being. And because obviously, as you know, things can't be perfect and things don't go the way that you plan, there was so much stress and strife and, you know, I don't know, just like internal turmoil of not getting things to be perfect the way that I envisioned, that I didn't have that control. Again, just in life, right? It's just like what happens in your art kind of is like this, you know, analogy for life. But if you allow yourself to just be present in the moment, to not have any kind of expectations, and if you touch blue yarn and the blue yarn makes you happy, then sit with the blue yarn, you know, and then maybe right. Some other yarn will come and it will tell you it's its turn. So then you go to the green yarn, right? And being able as a creative person, especially because with these Fiberside Chats, we you know, like to celebrate holidays. So in addition to Memorial Day, it's also National Creativity Today. So I definitely do agree that when you can allow yourself to kind of shift and be in both places, it can be very rewarding. But I'm curious too, as someone that is a later in life diagnosed ADHDer, do you find now, especially given, you know, your situation, that it's really difficult to kind of go back into the product oriented lane? So I know for myself, I have a really difficult time now doing projects, and I've been trying to finish work in progress projects because, you know, they're just kind of languishing. And I really wanted to finish them so that now I can just have this space, like you said, going to the next thing. I really want to be in a space where I can just create and not be limited to, you know, seeing that I have all these projects around me and they're, you know, not finished. So I really wanted to get them done, but because they were all product oriented projects and I'm not in that creative headspace now I'm finding those projects difficult, but I'm finding the process ones more rewarding. So I'm curious, did you find that like after going through treatment and therapy and all of that, has your creation process changed, you know, in what you find joy in creating as far as product versus process?
Absolutely. And it has totally changed, and it always changes. So for me, I'm very much very tied to the seasons with my creativity. You know, right now I am loving all the fluorescence and the brights and the new energy and thriving off of just things that stimulate you visually. You know, in the fall, I'm much more into the earthy jewel tones. Like that's usually my comfort zone then. But I do try to consciously make an effort, you know, at least once a month to redo some of my colorways, make more of a colorway that was one of my spur of the moment. I just threw things together, and sometimes it works. Sometimes I didn't write the recipe down, so I make like 4 different things and it's still not quite the same. But I am getting better at trying to pick one thing, at least one thing each month that I write down the recipe, and I do make sure that it is something that I can remake till the end of time. Because, you know, I do try to keep a few different things in stock as far as colorways or, you know, just certain colors in general. Because usually when I'm in one of my moods where it's just create, I make maybe 4 or 5 of each thing, and that's it, which is great for one project for one person. But like, if it's something that I truly enjoy and the color makes me super happy, what I ended up with, and I didn't write down the recipe, that's also like a little frustrating too, because I look at it and like a week later I'll be like, geez, I wish I would have wrote that down.
Yeah, well, no, definitely. And I think that, you know, especially when working with customers that have expectations for things like sweater quantities worth of fiber, or, you know, I didn't buy enough, can you make it again? That it's kind of hard when you're thinking about it, like you're getting an artisanal product that, you know, is not made by a machine. It's not made by, you know, in a factory. And so there are going to be these nuances that make it unique and special. But yeah, it is really hard to create on demand, I think. And I think that's something that I've always, you know, avoided in life, was trying to make art for someone's specifications. Like it was always easy for me to make art and then sell it after I made it, because then there wasn't that emotional attachment to it. Like I had that ability to create and then send it out into the world to you know, bring joy to others. But like when you have to create, and like you said, there are very specific confines, then that's like the death of creativity for me, because then it's like someone took the idea of the creation and kind of like snuffed out all the good, you know, bits to it, right? So definitely agree with you with that. So I just want to be able to go and see if there are any comments that people have or questions that people have for you before we get to towards the end. So let's see here. So someone said, I find the fiber arts help us find our creativity. You just do what you can and accept the past is just that. Charge ahead, feel the best you can. I'm so glad you are addressing this part of your journey. So there you go.
Awesome.
And then someone else said, totally understand the energy value. I also have had to learn this with autoimmune issues. Yeah, so I think that's, you know, something that perhaps a lot of people maybe struggle with, right? Is because especially with like social media and the way that you want people to see you being portrayed, right? That like, you know, oh, you can produce these gorgeous things and, you know, you can make, you know, an abundance of it and all of that, but at what cost? And it could be someone that's able-bodied, you know, but they're experiencing mental anguish and, you know, emotional burnout, and they're not, you know, recognizing it. So that's not sustainable, you know, and so I think that the image that we try to portray, especially as, you know, an online business, it can be very challenging to keep it real with people, right? And to be authentic with people. But at the same time, you know, when we don't share those things, then it's almost like we have this comparison, you know, going on, or like, oh man, everybody else is able to do X, Y, and Z but me, when in fact, I think everyone on some level, to some degree, at some point in their life is struggling, right? We all have things that are challenging for us, right? So I just think that definitely in having a group in a space like the Wool and Fiber Arts group, it's wonderful that, you know, there's so many different types of people that are, you know, creating for many different reasons, whether you're creating because you know, need to have an income, or you're creating as a form of expression, or, you know, it's your outlet, right? I know that there's the expression craft as therapy, but I definitely feel like, you know, having, you know, felting needles and, you know, having knitting needles and things like that, the repetitive motion definitely kind of brings everything down and allows me to process and get to a place where it's like, oh, okay, I can handle this problem. But like, you know, like you said, you just get so far ahead of yourself with all of these ideas that it can make it hard to actually approach things in a very calm-minded way.
Right. Yeah, I think you nailed it. Like as people out there on social media and small businesses, and you're interacting with people, I've realized, so I've always been an open book all my life. People ask and I tell, because I don't want to keep secrets. I don't want people to make assumptions, but there is that fine line of your personal life and your business life, and how much of your personal life you're willing to put out there into your business. I personally, there's some moments where I'm like, well, maybe I didn't need to share that, but it is what it is. And then there's other times that I've gotten contacted, or people will approach me at festivals and be like, your openness was so nice that I'm suffering from ADHD as an older person, or, I have those similar blocks or difficulties with mobility. I've met so many amazing people through this platform and through demos and everything else out there in the public at different events. The people that have had hip replacements or knee replacements, and they're like, I can't spin anymore, and I turn them on to e-spinners. And I think there is a lot of people that as we age, we reach these difficulties naturally in mobility or abilities with our hands, arthritis, everything else. So I think, yes, there's certain things you probably shouldn't share about your personal life, don't air dirty laundry, that whole thing. But I think there's a happy medium where sharing your personal experience as far as your limitations and being open and honest with your followers or your clientele is very refreshing, because I only put guarantees out there that I know I can fulfill. I'm very open and honest with people when they order, like, I will get it done just as soon as I can, but whether that means it's in 2 days or in 2 weeks, I just need a little bit of flexibility. And everybody that I've met, especially here in the WAF group, has been so accepting of that, because there are so many of us that are open and honest up front. I think any business needs that. I think you need to be honest to everyone. And for so long, personally, there was me, and then there was behind the scenes me. And eventually those two need to be able to coexist in both realms.
And because obviously, like I was saying before, you can be yourself, right? But then if you're trying to be someone else and trying to be this person that you're not, that's really hard to sustain, and you're not going to be able to keep that up, just like even having that creativity burnout, so
For sure.
But I know that I could talk with you for so much longer about this. Like, the psychology of creating is really so fascinating to me. And too, especially with like ADHD, and just how the fiber arts are so healing for so many people for so many different reasons. And, how do we process grief through the fiber arts? How do we, process loss, and like all of these things that I think a lot of people turn to the fiber arts for, because of that tactile input, the community, the camaraderie, the getting back to like being off of screens. I know we're on a screen now, but and so it's finding that balance. And I think that's what maybe a lot of people are struggling with. And so, if anyone has any comments or thoughts on ways that, you found that balance, definitely feel free to go ahead and put it in the comments, so that those of us that are going to watch the replay, or if you're watching the replay now, you can kind of skim through and see if there's any suggestions or ideas that resonate with you. Well, thank you so much, Kayla. I really, really, really appreciate your time today. It was so enlightening, to just have this conversation, and refreshing to be able to talk to you. So I hope everybody that was able to watch it to the end, if you came in a little bit late, don't worry, the replay will be available as well. And this is, like I said, going to be the last Fiberside chat. So in the spirit of talking to Kayla about it, I have the summer coming up with like these in-person workshops, and I don't feel like I can do both justice of planning for what I have to do for my job, and then also being able to give people like yourself the attention and the care that I would like to. So we will be returning on November 14th. So I still have about like at least 20 vendors that have signed up and artists that have signed up. So I'll be reaching out to them. If you're one of them wondering like, when is it going to be your turn? I promise you I didn't forget about you. But for everybody else, yeah, you can go ahead and watch all of the replays, including this one. It will be on the Wool and Fiber Arts YouTube channel. And I think I put that in the description. If it disappeared, I'll go ahead and put it back. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your holiday weekend. And if there's anything else you'd like to share, Kayla, before we go, feel free.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. And it's very enlightening to see other vendors and kind of how they got here. And I'm always open if anybody feels like this resonates with them and they need to reach out to someone, always open to that. I'm always up for talking and trying to help people learn from my experiences, or just to be an ear to listen to someone that's like, I'm kind of going through the same thing. I think the best part about this group is everybody is so supportive and so accepting, no matter who you are, what you do. And I thank all the admins on this group for keeping the group that way, for monitoring to make sure people feel safe, secure, heard, and valued as vendors and customers and kind of the community all alike. Is we're all on this even playing field. It's not like, vendors are, in this own little group, and the customers and the creators, we all intermingled, and there's just so much love in the group. So thank you for taking the time to do stuff like this to get the backstory of people
definitely, because it's like I said, to me, hearing people's stories and hearing what they love about the fiber arts, why they're driven to create, is something that I find fascinating. We can all come from different walks of life and different places, but I think when you're amongst people that find the love and the passion for it that like we have, there's nothing better to meet someone that gets it. So I appreciate your time, and thank you everybody for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you in November. If you're going to be at any of the in-person fiber events, over the summer, like if anyone's going to be at Rhinebeck or Convergence or any of those places and you happen to see me, definitely come and say hi. All right. So take care, everybody, and have a great rest of your weekend. Bye-bye.